The moment Clara's hands trembled beneath the weight of Julian Marwood's sudden awakening, she knew nothing would ever be the same. Have you ever wondered what truly matters when everything else is stripped away? When success, money, and power suddenly mean nothing? When the balance sheets and corporate empires fade into insignificance against the simple act of human connection? For 3 months, billionaire Julian Marwood lay trapped in the prison of his own mind, while nurse Clara Voss spoke to an empty room, until one ordinary morning changed everything. What could possibly make a man who had everything realize he had nothing at all? In the quiet halls of Riverview General Hospital, where life and death dance their eternal waltz, miracles aren't measured by machines or monitors. They're found in the gentle touch of a hand, the soft whisper of encouragement, and the unwavering belief that every patient deserves dignity, regardless of the balance in their bank account. This is where Clara Voss had devoted her life for more than a decade. Each morning, she'd walk through those sliding glass doors, her sensible shoes squeaking against the polished floors, her heart open to whatever challenges awaited. She never expected to become the catalyst for one of the most profound awakenings ever witnessed within those sterile walls. Julian Marwood's name graced the sides of skyscrapers and the covers of business magazines. His net worth could fund small countries. Yet there he lay, motionless, silent, reduced to breath and heartbeat, as vulnerable as a newborn. His expensive suits replaced by a hospital gown, his commanding presence diminished to a body kept alive by medical science. For 93 days, Clara bathed him, turned him, spoke to him, never knowing if her words penetrated the darkness of his coma. She'd tell him about the weather, about the changing seasons outside his window, about the little triumphs and struggles of her day. Not because it was protocol, but because she believed every soul deserves acknowledgement, even when they cannot respond. Then came that winter morning when everything changed. The routine bath, the warmed water with a hint of lavender, the careful, respectful movements as she tended to his needs. And then, a flutter, a twitch, eyes opening with startling clarity. Words that would reshape not just 2 lives, but an entire philosophy of existence. Humanity is the truest wealth. Those 5 words, spoken from the edge of oblivion, contained more wisdom than all the business strategies that had built his fortune. They crystallized a truth so profound yet so often forgotten in our chase for success and status. Before I continue with this remarkable story, I want to ask you, what do you believe constitutes true wealth in life? Is it the digits in your bank account? The possessions you own? Or is it something less tangible, but infinitely more valuable? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you value most. Now, let's return to that fateful morning at Riverview General, where a nurse's compassion and a billionaire's awakening were about to collide in a moment that would forever change their understanding of what it means to be truly rich. Clara Voss wasn't born into privilege. Her childhood home on the outskirts of town had creaky floors and windows that whistled in winter winds. Her father worked double shifts at the local factory, while her mother stretched every dollar at the grocery store. What they lacked in money, they made up for in love. A lesson Clara carried into adulthood like a treasured heirloom. At 17, Clara watched her mother fade away from cancer. The nurses who tended to her in those final days showed such gentle grace that Clara found her calling. "They gave my mother dignity when her body was failing her," she once explained to a colleague. "I wanted to be that person for someone else." Nursing school came next, funded by scholarships, student loans, and weekend jobs serving coffee. She graduated top of her class, not because she memorized textbooks better than others, but because she understood that medicine without compassion was like a body without a soul. Riverview General hired her fresh out of school. The recovery wing became her sanctuary, its long corridors and beeping monitors as familiar as the streets of her neighborhood. For 12 years, she arrived at 6:45 a.m., hair pulled back, uniform pressed, ready to face whatever challenges awaited. Her daily routine never varied. First came chart reviews, then medication rounds, followed by check-ins with each patient. What set Clara apart wasn't her technical skill, though that was exceptional, but how she spoke to each person as if they were the only one who mattered. "Mr. Jenkins, your daughter sent these flowers. Yellow roses. She said they're your favorite." "Mrs. Abernathy, I brought you an extra blanket. The weather report says we're in for a cold snap." "Mr. Marwood, the sky is absolutely clear today. The kind of blue that makes you remember what possibilities feel like." Her colleagues noticed how she never rushed, even when the ward buzzed with demands. She moved with deliberate care, her hands steady, her voice a calming anchor in the often chaotic sea of recovery. 3 years into her career, Clara lost her best friend from nursing school to a car accident. The randomness of tragedy struck her once again, carving a deeper well of empathy within her heart. "Life can change in a heartbeat," she told new nurses she mentored. "That's why every moment with our patients matters." Clara's apartment remained modest, a one-bedroom space filled with second-hand furniture and plants that thrived under her attentive care. Her salary could have afforded more, but she chose to live simply, donating regularly to the hospital's patient assistance fund. The contrast between her world and those she cared for often struck her, particularly with patients like Julian Marwood. While she worried about car repairs and electric bills, her patients sometimes owned entire power companies. Yet beneath designer hospital gowns and behind famous last names, she saw the same human vulnerability, the universal fear of pain, loneliness, and mortality. Riverview General's recovery wing occupied the east side of the 6th floor. Morning light spilled through large windows, illuminating corridors where lives hung in delicate balance. The nurses' station formed the hub, a circular desk surrounded by monitors tracking vital signs from each room. Patient rooms branched outward like spokes on a wheel, their sliding glass doors offering both visibility and the illusion of privacy. Clara moved through this environment with quiet confidence. Patients' families often mistook her for someone more senior, drawn to her calm presence during their most frightening moments. Even the most demanding doctors respected her assessments. "If Clara says something's wrong, you listen," was the unofficial rule among medical staff. Her locker contained small treasures, a seashell from her only beach vacation, a faded photo of her parents, a collection of thank-you notes from recovered patients. These reminders grounded her on difficult days when death claimed victory despite their best efforts. What truly distinguished Clara wasn't just how she cared for the conscious, but her dedication to those lost in the twilight of coma. When others saw only unresponsive bodies, Clara recognized souls still present, still deserving of dignity and connection. "The human spirit doesn't vanish just because someone can't respond," she explained to a new nurse who questioned why she bothered talking to comatose patients. "Connection matters, especially when someone's alone in the dark." This philosophy guided her through countless cases, but none would test her beliefs or change her life. Quite like the 3 months she spent caring for the man whose empire stretched across continents, while his consciousness remained locked away in the prison of his mind. Julian Marwood built his fortune from nothing. The son of a postal worker and a librarian, he launched his first tech company from a garage at 22. By 30, he'd sold it for 8 figures. By 40, he controlled a global network of businesses spanning technology, real estate, and finance. Marwood Industries employed thousands across 6 continents, its sleek logo adorning glass towers in every major financial district worldwide. Business magazines called him relentless. Competitors used less flattering terms. Julian's negotiating style left no room for weakness or hesitation. "Business isn't personal," he'd say, signing deals that crushed rivals while expanding his holdings. His annual income exceeded the GDP of small nations. His New York penthouse, Swiss chalet, and private island in the Maldives sat mostly empty. Trophies rather than homes. Behind closed doors, Julian's personal assistant managed his life with military precision. Meetings scheduled in 15-minute blocks. Meals delivered according to nutritional requirements rather than taste. Exercise routines optimized for maximum efficiency. Even his rare social appearances were strategic, photographed with celebrities and politicians to strengthen his brand. What remained conspicuously absent from Julian's perfectly calibrated existence were meaningful connections. 2 failed marriages collapsed under the weight of his absence and emotional distance. His college friends received occasional generous gifts, but no returned phone calls. His parents died within months of each other, while he was expanding operations in Asia. He attended both funerals, but left immediately after to close a pending acquisition. "I'll focus on relationships after I secure my legacy," he told his second wife during their divorce proceedings. That after never came. Each achievement only pushed the finish line further away. Another mountain to climb, another competitor to outmaneuver. Then came that rainy Tuesday in September. Julian's driver had called in sick. Impatient with the delay in finding a replacement, Julian grabbed the keys to his rarely driven Aston Martin and headed to an important meeting himself. The combination of unfamiliar handling, wet roads, and a text message proved catastrophic. The car hydroplaned at 80 miles per hour, flipped 3 times, and wrapped around a highway support column. First responders needed the jaws of life to extract him from the wreckage. The trauma team worked for 7 hours to repair internal bleeding, set shattered bones, and relieve pressure on his damaged brain. When they finished, Julian Marwood, the man whose decisions moved markets, lay connected to machines that breathed for him, fed him, and monitored the fragile biological functions his money couldn't replace. For 93 days, Julian existed in limbo. His executive team initially postponed decisions until Mr. Marwood recovers. After the first month, emergency protocols transferred temporary authority to his board. Stock prices fluctuated with each medical update. Business channels speculated about succession plans. Rivals circled, sensing vulnerability in his absence. Inside room 617 at Riverview General, none of that mattered. The billion-dollar empire continued without its creator, while he lay still, his brain activity minimal, his prognosis uncertain. The private room, the best the hospital offered, featured upgraded furnishings and equipment, yet nothing his wealth secured could reach into the darkness where his consciousness floated. Doctors explained to his executive assistant, the closest thing to family who visited regularly, that coma patients sometimes experience fragmented awareness, bizarre dreams, distorted memories, sensory impressions without context. While Julian's body remained motionless, his mind might be assembling and reassembling pieces of his past, like a broken kaleidoscope. Perhaps in that strange twilight, Julian revisited moments his conscious mind had dismissed as unimportant. His father teaching him to ride a bicycle, the look of pride on his mother's face at his graduation, his first wife's tears when he missed their anniversary for the 3rd consecutive year, the assistant who quit after a decade because "I don't even think you know my name," the nephew whose college graduation gift arrived with a card signed by Julian's secretary. The irony wasn't lost on the hospital staff. The man who commanded boardrooms and bent economies to his will now couldn't lift a finger or speak a word. His net worth, $17.3 billion according to Forbes' latest estimate, couldn't accelerate healing or guarantee recovery. The private doctors flown in from Johns Hopkins and Mayo Clinic offered no different prognosis than Riverview's own neurologists. Wait and see. For the first time in decades, Julian Marwood's schedule was completely empty. His time belonged not to meetings or markets, but to the slow, uncertain rhythm of a body struggling to repair itself, and to the gentle care of a nurse who saw not a billionaire, but simply a human being lost in the dark. Clara first met Julian Marwood 3 days after his accident. The nursing supervisor approached her in the break room, coffee mug in hand. "I need my best with the VIP in 617, she said, sliding his chart across the table. The CEO of Marwood Industries, board members calling every hour, his assistant practically living in the waiting room. Clara accepted the assignment without hesitation. To her, the unconscious man behind the headlines was just another soul needing care. When she entered his room that first morning, she ignored the expensive flower arrangements and the parade of specialists. Instead, she went straight to Julian, introduced herself, and explained what she was about to do, just as she would with any patient. "The attending physician says you might hear us," she told him while checking his vitals. "So I'll keep you updated on everything happening in your care." Her colleagues noticed how Clara treated Julian differently than other staff did. Where they saw a billionaire business titan whispering about his wealth or the accident details they'd gleaned from news reports, Clara saw only a patient suspended between life and death, deserving the same respect as the retired teacher in room 620 or the construction worker in 614. Each morning began the same way. Clara would enter at precisely 7:30 a.m., open the blinds, and describe the weather. "Good morning, Mr. Marwood. It's Tuesday, November 10th. The sky is clear today and the trees have lost most of their leaves. Winter's coming, but the sun makes everything golden." The medical routine never varied, checking vitals, administering medications, adjusting IVs, examining for pressure sores, physical therapy to prevent muscle atrophy. Yet Clara transformed these clinical necessities into acts of dignity. She would explain each procedure before starting, maintaining one-sided conversations as if Julian might answer any moment. "I'm going to reposition you now to prevent bed sores," she would say, her movements gentle but confident. "The physical therapist mentioned your muscle tone seems better this week. That's encouraging." Between required procedures, Clara added her own touches. She brought a small speaker to play classical music, Bach in the mornings, Debussy in afternoons. She'd read aloud from the Wall Street Journal, keeping him connected to the business world he once dominated. Sometimes when the floor was quiet, she'd hum lullabies her mother once sang to her. "My mother always said music reaches places words can't go," she told him while adjusting his blankets. "Maybe these melodies can find you wherever you are right now." As weeks turned to months, Clara shared more personal stories, her weekend hike in the nearby state park, her neighbor's new puppy, the book club selection she'd just finished. Not from obligation, but from genuine belief that human connection transcended consciousness. Then came that winter morning in December. The overnight nurse had reported no changes. Clara began her shift as usual, but decided today warranted something special. After 3 months without improvement, patients needed extra comfort, both for their bodies and their spirits. She prepared a full-body bath, something beyond the standard daily cleaning. She warmed the room slightly and added lavender oil to the water, known for its calming properties. Clara arranged soft towels and gentle cleansers, transformed the sterile hospital room into a space of care and intention. "Today we're doing something special, Mr. Marwood," she explained while preparing the portable bath equipment. "A proper bath with warm water and lavender. Studies show aromatherapy can reach patients even in deep comas. As she began the careful bathing routine, Clara had no idea this ordinary act of compassion would become the catalyst for an extraordinary awakening. Before we continue with what happened next, I want to ask you, have you ever experienced the power of human connection during healing, either as a caregiver or someone receiving care? How did simple acts of compassion affect recovery? Share your experiences in the comments below. Steam rose from the portable bath basin as Clara tested the water temperature with her wrist. Perfect. Warm enough to comfort, not hot enough to stress delicate skin. The lavender oil formed tiny prismatic patterns on the water's surface, its gentle scent replacing the sharp clinical smell of antiseptic. "The water's ready, Mr. Marwood," Clara announced, moving with practiced efficiency. "I'll start with your face, then work downward." The room fell quiet except for the soft splash of water and distant hospital sounds, the rhythmic beep of monitors, the occasional announcement over the intercom, a cart rolling past the door. Clara wrung excess water from a soft cloth and began with his forehead, her touch gentle yet firm. "You might enjoy knowing it snowed last night," she said, carefully washing his face. "Just a light dusting, but the hospital grounds look beautiful, like something from a holiday card." As she worked, Clara continued her one-sided conversation, describing the winter scene outside his window, mentioning an interesting article she'd read about market trends in Asia. Her voice maintained its soothing cadence while her hands performed their careful dance of cleansing and care. She moved to his arms, supporting each limb with one hand while washing with the other. The methodical routine felt almost meditative. Lift, wash, rinse, dry, repeat. Through it all, Julian remained still, his breathing steady, his face serene in its unresponsiveness. "I heard the board postponed the Singapore merger," she mentioned while washing his right arm. "Your assistant said they won't proceed without your input. That says something about how much they value your judgment, doesn't it?" Clara reached for fresh water, the basin now cooling. As she adjusted the temperature, adding more warmth, she didn't notice the first subtle change, a nearly imperceptible twitch of Julian's finger against the sheet. Returning to his bedside, she began washing his chest, careful around the monitoring leads attached to his skin. "My neighbor's daughter got accepted to medical school yesterday," she continued. "Her mom cried when she called to tell me. It's amazing what determination can—" Clara's hand froze mid-motion. Something changed. The steady rhythm of the heart monitor picked up slightly. Had she imagined it? Then came the flutter, so slight she nearly missed it, of Julian's eyelashes against his cheeks. "Mr. Marwood," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Another flutter, more pronounced this time. Clara's own heart accelerated. In 12 years of nursing, she'd witnessed patients emerging from comas, but never so suddenly, never without warning signs in the days leading up. "Mr. Marwood, can you hear me? If you can hear me, try to move your fingers." The cloth dripped water onto the sheet as Clara held perfectly still, watching for any response. 3 seconds passed. 5. 10. Then, unmistakable, his index finger lifted slightly, then lowered. "Oh my God," Clara breathed, quickly pressing the call button. "Doctor to room 617, please. Urgent." Before anyone could respond, Julian's eyelids trembled, then slowly, as if weighted by the 3 months of stillness, lifted. His gaze, unfocused at first, drifted around the ceiling before settling directly on Clara's face. Time seemed to stop. The water droplets on his skin caught the winter light streaming through the window. The steady beep of monitors faded from Clara's awareness. Everything narrowed to this impossible moment. Eyes that medical science predicted might never open again now looking directly into hers. Clara couldn't move, couldn't speak. The wet cloth slipped from her fingers onto the floor with a soft plop. Julian's lips parted, dry from months without use. Clara expected confusion, disorientation, the typical responses of patients emerging from prolonged unconsciousness. Instead, with startling clarity, Julian spoke 5 words that defied every expectation. Humanity is the truest wealth. His voice emerged rough from disuse, but unmistakably intentional. Not the confused mumbling of someone waking from a long darkness, but a declaration, as if he'd been forming this thought throughout his 3 months of silence. Clara's knees weakened. She grabbed the bedrail for support, tears forming instantly in her eyes. "Mr. Marwood," she managed, her professional composure cracking. "You're awake. You're actually awake." Julian's gaze remained steady, his eyes no longer the vacant stare of a man lost to the world, but alive with recognition and something else, a profound awareness that hadn't been there before his accident. "Water," he whispered, his second word more practical than philosophical. Clara's training kicked in. She reached for the cup with its bent straw, held it to his lips while supporting his head, allowing just enough moisture to soothe his parched throat without risking aspiration. As Julian took those first sips, the doctor rushed in, followed by 2 other nurses. They froze at the doorway, witnessing what many had deemed medically improbable. The sterile hospital room, once just another space where bodies were maintained and conditions monitored, had transformed into hallowed ground where the impossible had just occurred. Clara stepped back as the medical team moved in to assess Julian, but his eyes sought hers through the sudden flurry of activity. In that moment of connection, they both understood that everything had changed. Not just his medical status, but something fundamental about existence itself. The bath water cooled, forgotten, its purpose complete in ways neither Clara nor Julian could have anticipated. The awakening was not just physical but spiritual, the beginning of a journey neither had expected to take. The days following Julian's awakening unfolded in careful measures. Physical therapy twice daily, cognitive assessments every morning, speech therapy sessions to strengthen muscles weakened by months of silence. Medical staff documented his progress with clinical precision, noting improved grip strength, verbal response times, memory function. What they couldn't measure was the profound shift happening beneath these outward markers of recovery. 1 week after opening his eyes, Julian asked Clara to stay after her shift. The evening light painted long shadows across his room as she pulled a chair beside his bed. "I heard everything," he said, his voice stronger now but still carrying the weight of revelation. Not continuously, not clearly, but pieces, fragments. You reading the business news, describing the weather, singing sometimes. Clara nodded, unsure what to say. "I've been thinking about what I said when I first woke up," Julian continued, his gaze steady. "Humanity is the truest wealth. I don't even know where those words came from, but they feel more real than anything I've ever said in a boardroom." Over the following weeks, as Julian's strength gradually returned, these evening conversations became a ritual. Clara would finish her rounds, then spend 30 minutes sitting with Julian before heading home. Hospital administration made exceptions to visiting policies, recognizing something remarkable was happening in room 617. "I built my first company to prove I could," Julian confessed during one such twilight discussion. "The second to crush the competitor who dismissed my initial success as luck. The third because the numbers in my bank account never seemed large enough." "And now?" Clara asked. Julian looked toward the window where city lights twinkled against the darkening sky. "Now I wonder what it was all for. I have buildings with my name on them, but no one to call when the night gets too quiet." These moments of vulnerable truth created a bridge between them, nurse and patient, caregiver and recipient. two humans recognizing each other's authentic selves. Clara shared stories of her own life, her mother's illness, her struggle through nursing school, her belief in the healing power of compassion. Julian listened with an attentiveness he'd never given his highest-paid advisors. "I used to measure days by deals closed and profits secured," Julian said one evening, now able to sit up unassisted. "How do you measure yours?" Clara considered the question. "By moments of connection, times when I know I've truly seen someone and they've seen me. Everything else feels secondary." As January turned to February, Julian's physical recovery accelerated. He progressed from sitting to standing, from abbreviated walks around his room to slow journeys down the hospital corridor, Clara often by his side. During these careful expeditions, they passed other patients, family members, hospital staff, many who recognized the billionaire whose awakening had made national news. What observers couldn't miss was the change in Julian himself. The business titan known for cold efficiency now stopped to thank cleaning staff by name. He asked nurses about their families. He listened, truly listened, when others spoke. News of Julian's transformation spread throughout Riverview General. Doctors who had initially viewed his case as merely an interesting neurological study now found themselves contemplating the connection between physical and spiritual healing. Nurses who had been skeptical of the billionaire's authenticity witnessed his daily interactions with Clara and reconsidered their judgments. "Your company stock is up 12% since you regained consciousness," Clara mentioned one afternoon, showing him the financial news on her tablet. Julian smiled faintly. "Strange how little that number means to me now." "What does matter?" she asked. "The way you spoke to me when you thought I couldn't hear. The dignity you gave me when I was helpless. The humanity you recognized when others saw only a rich man's body and a business empire's future." His eyes held hers. "Those 93 days taught me more about wealth than 30 years of acquisition ever did." As February's chill gave way to March's promise of renewal, Julian continued rebuilding his strength while reimagining his life's purpose. The man who once counted success in billions now measured it in moments of genuine connection. Have you ever experienced a moment of clarity that changed your perspective on what truly matters? A time when circumstances stripped away pretense and revealed a deeper truth about life's real priorities? Share your story in the comments. Your personal awakening might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. By April, Julian's medical team agreed he could continue his recovery as an outpatient. Physical therapy had restored most of his mobility, though he still walked with a slight limp, a permanent reminder of the accident that had changed everything. "We're releasing you next Monday," the neurologist announced during morning rounds. "Your progress has exceeded every expectation." Julian nodded, then looked at Clara. "I owe that to exceptional care." The day before his scheduled discharge, Julian asked Clara to accompany him to the hospital's healing garden, a quiet space on the ground floor where patients could connect with nature during long recoveries. Spring had arrived early, with cherry blossoms and tulips creating bursts of color against newly green lawns. Clara helped Julian navigate to a stone bench beneath a flowering magnolia tree. For several minutes, they sat in comfortable silence, watching butterflies dance between blooms. "I received the final report from my executive board this morning," Julian finally said, his voice steady. "They've kept everything running these past months, preserved the company, even expanded our market share in Europe." "That's impressive," Clara replied. "They must be eager to have you back." Julian turned to face her directly. "I'm not going back. Not as the man I was before. Yesterday, I outlined a new vision for Marwood Industries. My team thought I was joking at first." "What kind of vision?" "We're establishing a healthcare division that will fund universal access clinics in underserved communities. 20% of annual profits will create medical scholarship funds for low-income students, and we're implementing a revolutionary caregiver support program for all employees. Clara listened, amazed at the scope of these changes. The board thinks I've lost my mind, Julian continued with a slight smile. Maybe I have, or maybe I've finally found it. He reached for her hand, the first time he had initiated physical contact outside of therapy exercises. 3 months in darkness changed me, but your kindness showed me a path forward. You treated me with dignity when I was nothing but a body in a bed. That lesson is worth more than everything I built before. The garden conversation marked a turning point. Upon his official discharge, Julian didn't disappear into his previous world of luxury and isolation. Instead, he returned to Riverview General 3 times weekly, partly for ongoing therapy, but increasingly to meet with hospital administration about a new partnership. By summer, the first phase of the Marwood Foundation's healthcare initiative launched with Riverview as its pilot location. The program expanded access to cutting-edge treatments, regardless of patients' financial status. A new wing dedicated to long-term coma care broke ground in August, with design input from nurses who understood patients' needs beyond medical necessities. Clara watched these developments with quiet pride, never seeking recognition for her role in Julian's transformation. Yet her own life evolved in unexpected ways. The hospital promoted her to Director of Compassionate Care Practices, a newly created position focused on training staff in the human elements of healing. Your approach with Mr. Marwood demonstrated what medicine sometimes forgets, the Chief of Medicine explained when offering her the role. Technical expertise saves lives, but compassion heals souls. Their professional paths now intersected regularly. Committee meetings, program planning sessions, training workshops. With each encounter, their connection deepened beyond their shared history. Julian no longer saw Clara as his caregiver, nor did Clara view him as her patient. Instead, they recognized in each other a shared vision of how healthcare could transform when humanity remained central. Business magazines published profiles of Julian's radical corporate reinvention. "Billionaire wakes from coma with new mission," read one headline. Another declared, "Marwood's near-death experience reshapes corporate responsibility." Financial analysts debated whether his new approach would strengthen or weaken his empire's future. Julian paid little attention to these speculations. His focus had narrowed to what mattered, creating meaningful change while building genuine connections. He still attended board meetings and made strategic decisions, but his definition of success had fundamentally shifted. By fall, Julian invited Clara to join the Marwood Foundation's advisory board, recognizing her insight was invaluable to their shared mission. Their professional relationship provided a framework for something more personal to develop gradually, authentically, without pressure from either side. The ripple effects extended beyond Riverview General. Other hospitals began implementing similar compassionate care initiatives. Medical schools incorporated Julian's story into discussions about holistic healing approaches. Nursing programs emphasized the critical importance of dignity and human connection in patient care. 1 year after that fateful morning when Julian opened his eyes and spoke those 5 transformative words, he and Clara stood together at the dedication ceremony for Riverview's new Compassionate Care Wing. Hundreds gathered, medical professionals, community members, patients whose lives had been touched by the changing philosophy of care. Julian stepped to the microphone, his gaze finding Clara in the front row. "A year ago, I owned everything but valued nothing," he began. "Today, I understand that connection heals more completely than any medicine. Empathy rebuilds what breaks within us, and every human being deserves to be seen, heard, and treated with dignity. especially when they cannot speak for themselves. The audience applauded, but Julian's attention remained fixed on Clara, the woman whose simple acts of kindness had awakened him to life's deepest truths. 2 years after Julian's awakening, he stood on a TED Talk stage, addressing a global audience of business leaders, healthcare professionals, and everyday viewers seeking inspiration. "Before my accident, I measured value in assets and acquisitions," he said, his voice steady and sure. "I now understand that our lives are defined not by what we own, but by how deeply we connect." The video of his talk reached 10 million views within a week, not because of his wealth or status, but because his message resonated with a universal truth. Human connection remains our most precious resource. The partnership between Clara and Julian evolved into the Compassionate Care Foundation, which transformed treatment protocols in hospitals across the country. Their model emphasized treating patients as whole persons rather than collections of symptoms. Medical schools incorporated their findings into curriculum reforms. Healthcare systems reported improved recovery rates when implementing their connection-centered approach. Clara never sought publicity, yet her influence permeated every aspect of their work. The nurse who once spoke to an empty room now addressed medical conferences, teaching doctors and nurses how small acts of dignity could bridge the gap between clinical treatment and true healing. The moment that changed everything wasn't when Julian opened his eyes, Clara explained in a rare interview. "It was every moment before, when I chose to see the person behind the patient, when I spoke to him as if he could hear me, when I refused to let his humanity be diminished by his condition." For Julian, the transformation extended to every aspect of his existence. He simplified his personal life, selling off properties and possessions that no longer aligned with his values. He restructured his companies around principles of community impact and employee well-being. Most importantly, he learned to measure days not by productivity, but by meaningful interactions. "My accident wasn't a tragedy," Julian often reflected. "It was an awakening. Sometimes we need to lose everything to discover what we truly need." The morning a billionaire opened his eyes and recognized the authentic wealth of human connection became more than a remarkable medical recovery. It evolved into a movement that challenged our collective understanding of success and value. One nurse's compassion, one patient's awakening, one moment that rippled outward, touching countless lives with its simple truth. We heal each other through recognition, dignity, and genuine presence. As you reflect on this story, consider the moments in your own life when connection transformed your understanding of what matters most. Where might you extend compassion today? Whose humanity might you recognize that others have overlooked? If this story touched you, please subscribe to Remarkable Stories for more narratives that explore how ordinary moments can lead to extraordinary transformations. Each day, we'll deliver another journey of redemption, compassion, and the remarkable power of human connection. Because sometimes, the most important awakenings happen not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments, when one heart truly sees another.